Let's talk about something that looks simple on paper, but in reality is one of the trickiest parts of the French property market, the gîte complex. If you're selling one or thinking of buying one, this is one of those subjects where a bit of honesty up front can save a huge amount of frustration later on. Because gîte complexes aren't just a house with a couple of rentals. They're part home, part business, part lifestyle. And the market treats them very differently from normal properties. Today, we're going to break down why they're so awkward, what buyers often overlook, and how you can move forward realistically, whichever side of the table you're on. Let's start with the single biggest misunderstanding. Vendors price a gîte complex like several houses added together. Buyers value it as a business. These two viewpoints are usually miles apart. Imagine a typical setup. Let's say a main house plus 3 gîtes. The owner has spent years renovating, decorating, improving, mowing, painting, updating, etc. the property. And of course, they want their investment back. So the mental maths goes something like, for the main house, roughly what a normal house is worth locally of the same size. Then each gîte, we'll price it the same as the main house, but a bit less. And then we just add all those together. And Bob's your uncle, that's the price. For the vendor's perspective, it makes sense. From a business perspective, not really. And that is where everything starts to unravel. Most buyers don't buy a gîte complex for fun. They buy it to make it an income, or at least to cover a mortgage, maintenance and running costs. So they look at one thing first: turnover. A complex advertised at a premium price needs to justify that price through the income it generates. And this is where we often see the biggest shocks. For example, a vendor may imagine the whole set is worth a certain figure. But when you reverse engineer that price into what the business should be earning, it usually turns out the property and turnover simply don't align. Most rural gîte setups bring in some income, often several tens of thousands per year, but rarely enough to justify a large combined price tag. That's why many of the properties sit unsold. The emotional price and the business price don't match. When a complex is overpriced as a business, there is only one other realistic strategy: stop selling it as a business and sell it as several separate houses. In France, that's called vente à la découpe. It's a good solution, but only if the property physically lends itself to it. So here's a simple découpe test I often use. To start with, the property needs its own entrances for each building, separate gardens or outdoor space for each unit, independent services, especially septic tanks, water connections and electricity connections, clear boundaries or the ability to create them. No awkward shared areas such as central courtyard or a single pool for everyone smack bang in the middle. If the answer is yes to most of these, découpe can work very well. But many rural complexes, especially Longère-style buildings you see in Brittany and Normandy and parts of the Loire, share absolutely everything. Shared courtyard, shared pool, shared parking, shared septic tank, one long roof, one long front wall, one water connection and one electricity connection. And in those cases, the découpe becomes complicated, legally, practically, and financially. So sometimes even the obvious solution simply isn't an option. Now let's flip the perspective. If you're a buyer, the single most important question is, how easy would it be to sell this later? People fall in love with the idea of having a ready-made complex, but they don't always consider the constraints that comes with it. A few things buyers rarely think about at the start. Could each building ever stand alone legally? If life changes, can you sell one cottage without losing everything? Are the gîtes properly separated, or are you inheriting a group setup that can only ever be sold as a group? Is the business income strong enough to justify the combined price? And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many gîte complexes lock you in. They're wonderful to run, but very rigid to resell. This is something I often say to buyers, especially those relocating from the UK, US, Australia, or New Zealand. Instead of buying one large gîte complex, buy one good main house, possibly with an attached gîte, and then buy additional small properties nearby over time. Close enough to manage, far enough apart that you can sell one unit without unravelling your entire lifestyle. If you have one gîte which for whatever reason isn't working, then you can just sell it off. You can just carry on with the others, no problem at all. This gives you flexibility. It spreads your risk, and it means that you're not trapped if turnover changes or if personal circumstances shift. For many people, this approach delivers everything they want. Without tying themselves to a giant all-in-one structure, they can't easily break it apart later. If you're selling, there are ways to improve your chances, even if the income isn't high or the decoupe isn't practical. A few simple steps help enormously. Be ready to show real turnover figures. Be prepared to discuss potential improvements. Make sure the gîtes meet basic tourist accommodation standards. Present everything as clearly as possible: floor plans, services, boundaries, technical reports, etc. And above all, price with the business reality in mind, not the emotional investment. A realistic, well-presented complex can still sell very well, but expectations need to match the market, not the renovation bill. So what's the bottom line? Gîte complexes are one of the most attractive lifestyle purchases in rural France, but they don't behave like normal properties. Vendors think in terms of buildings, buyers think in terms of income. The découpe system only works when the layout cooperates, and both sides benefit from understanding these differences early on in the game. Handled with realism and good advice, a gîte complex can be a brilliant opportunity. Handled without it, these properties can sit for years, with everyone wondering why. So, thanks for watching. If this helped, stay tuned. More practical French property advice is on its way. I'm Dan Newton, the French estate agent. Speak to you soon.